Guys, it's 6 o'clock on a Christmas morning, which means it's time to review this album by Dream Theater, Awake, which is a pretty weird one, but I still love it. Awake came out in the mid-90s, 1994, and the artwork is, in my opinion, probably Dream Theater's absolute best artwork of all time. It shows what I believe is supposed to be the Silent Man, and you can see the moon in the background. That's also a clock pointing at 6 o'clock, and you can see the mirror. It's a bunch of stuff like having to do with songs on the album. It's sort of the time with a lot of like more alternative sounding songs, but it's also its own sound. Like you have a lot of songs like Voices that show its own sort of thing. You even have songs like 6 o'clock where it's just weird jazz and blues stuff. And I definitely say this one has aged pretty well, because I remember hearing that a lot of fans, after hearing of course Images and Words and going to this one, you know, they didn't like this one as much because it was just so different, and it's hard to follow up such a masterpiece like that. But it's definitely aged very well recently. A lot of the fan base really loves this album. But it's still kind of underrated within the discography, but I still think it's really cool, even though it's really weird, but like every song sounds so different and everything is just so unique. The production sounds absolutely incredible on this album, and the drum sound doesn't suck ass, and all the band members sound really good here. Even James, who sings very raspily on some of the songs because it's more of a heavier, darker album, but he still sings them pretty well. There's just a couple instances of him sounding too weird. Now, this is the last album to feature keyboardist Kevin Moore, who, during the end of the writing sessions for this album, said he was gonna bail when the album was done. So I think he was there for part of the tour, and then just kind of left, and then they got Derek Sherinian to fill in for him. What's funny is, even though this album is heavier and darker, it was actually the label's decision to make it heavier and darker. And when they were on tour this album, later in the tour, James LaBrie had really bad food poisoning and had horrible vomiting episodes, which destroyed a good portion of his vocal cords. So from this point on, he has some vocal problems that are very unpredictable, but I'd say over time throughout this discography, his vocals have healed. And in some of the reviews for this album, a lot of the reviews of this album were mixed, but what I found interesting is apparently in Guitar World interview with Chuck Schuldiner, the leader of Death, he praised Awake and said that this was one of his biggest influences to his progressive era. So we start with 6 o'clock, and already it's kind of showing that they're not in as of a progressive epic mood with this album, but they still produce some great songs. 6 o'clock is one of my favorite Dream Theater songs. It's just so bizarre. It has like jazz and blues all over the place, and it starts out with some really great odd drumming from Mike Portnoy, and the riffs in there are really great. It has such a great intro that I use that intro for my podcast channel that I do with my friends. And then like out of nowhere you hear this like sampling of this one guy saying 6 o'clock on a Christmas morning, 6 o'clock on a Christmas morning. This is one of the songs where James LaBrie's vocals sound very bizarre. He sings like very raspily, and it sounds pretty cool in the verse because there's this really badass groove. But in the pre-chorus, he sounds very irritatingly raspy, but it's not too bad. But in the chorus, he sounds really great. Again, he makes it work. The guitar solo and keyboard work at the end is absolutely amazing. Once again, one of my favorite songs. Then we have Caught in a Web, which is a really awesome song. I love this one. I'd say this one's more in the vein of like a Pull Me Under, but a little bit shorter, more to the point. The intro riff is really badass and epic, and the verse at first kind of sounds really weird because James sounds a little bit raspy, but then they go into this like really cool bassy sort of part, and then it goes to the second part of the verse where James is singing kind of raspy and drawing out the notes a lot, but it actually works really well here. The chorus on this song is absolutely amazing. James sounds incredible on it, and the melodies from the keyboard sound incredible. And I love the little transitions throughout the song. You have a lot of Kevin Moore doing some like really cool jazzy stuff. But what makes this song really cool is there's this lengthy end part that's really awesome. There's a lot of really cool melodies and stuff that I'd say, starting with this album in particular, and even Images and Words, a lot of their albums, they'll kind of recur some melodies and riffs, and they'll kind of use them on different songs later in the album in different middle sections. And there's a part in here that's later, I believe, in I think it's Silent Man. But yeah, they kind of repeat ideas, and especially later in the album, you'll get ideas repeating from The Mirror into Lie. But enough of that. Caught of the Web has also an amazing guitar solo and great work from everyone. One of the best songs off the whole album. Then we have the ballad, the power ballad sort of sounding song on the album, Innocence Faded. It sounds very cheesy at first, and my biggest problem is definitely the chorus that uses that same cheesy melody that's played at the beginning, but the rest of the song is actually pretty good. The drumming in the verse is really, really cool and unorthodox, and I actually really like the melodies in the verse, and that pre-chorus sounded really good too. And the musicianship on the song works a lot, so I describe it a lot as like Another Day, where it's kind of cheesy, but it still works really well. It's just the chorus grinds my gears a little bit, but the ending of the song, like the big lengthy instrumental section, is really awesome and brings some more recurring themes and melodies throughout the album. There's some really great riffs. It's when you get into that like middle section, it's like how is this even a ballad? It sounds nothing like it. It just sounds like some crazy progressive metal. Another really good song, but almost gets ruined by the chorus. Then we have the A Mind Beside Itself trilogy. And if you combine all three of these songs, it's about 20 minutes, but the problem is that it works as a trilogy, not as a suite itself. So the first part is Erosomania, which is an instrumental. The second part is Voices. The third part is Silent Man. So we start with Erosomania, the instrumental. This song has so many great sections to it. It is one of their absolute best instrumentals. Every section of it is perfect. The keyboard line that Kevin Moore does is really like irritatingly cheesy, I guess, but it kind of hooks your attention. It's that kind of generic keyboard riff that's just but then they play like really good riffs over it, and there's some really great drumming in there. This song kind of has like two halves to it for me, where it builds up to this really great section and has a really great guitar solo. It's just kind of standard, and then all of a sudden the song turns upside down. It just gets really bizarre, and then all of a sudden it goes into this like classical part where it sounds like John Petrucci's trying to be Yngwie Malmsteen, where he's playing this like what sounds like a classical piece, and then he plays it like super fast, and then he just starts striding. They go through some more cool movements, and then it returns to that kind of irritating keyboard line. Overall, amazing instrumental. Then the end of that has like some weird like melodic fade out sounds that bleeds perfectly into Voices, which I think is the absolute best song off the entire album, and one of Dream Theater's best songs, and I'd say probably has the best lyrics of any Dream Theater song. This one is about schizophrenia and insanity, so with that they have crazy lyrics. Stuff like they have my mind on the radio, which is pretty weird. I've always loved that one line before the chorus kicks in where he says, like a scream but sort of silent, living out my nightmares. But anyways, the song begins with this really dark ambient atmosphere, and I'd say this song is pretty much, it's so different, but it sums up the whole album where they're going for this dark melodic approach. And the keyboard work here though is amazing. Even though John Mayung in that intro is doing a lot of the leading parts, Kevin just takes over this entire song from that point. Mike Portnoy like keeps changing it so much. He does this like really bizarre offbeat section that's like notorious and one of their most complicated parts of their entire discography. Of course, the intro is pretty epic and drawn up, but then all of a sudden it just stops and it goes into the melodic verse. And even though a lot of sections earlier were showing off a raspy James LaBrie, this is where he really shines his amazing vocals. He sounds so perfect here, just singing all these weird, crazy vocal lines and weird lyrics like Judas on the ceiling, devil on my back. And there's even this part where he says, and Easter's never coming, which is all weird lyrics. I think Mike Portnoy or something said that they, for the lyrics of this song, were comparing stuff in the Bible to insanity. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, James LaBrie just comes in screaming with that line, like a scream, but sort of silent, living out my nightmares, which goes into the amazing chorus where James is just screaming these great melodic notes. And then when you get to that like middle section where there's some really great high-pitched screaming, and then you hear this like weird vocal lines that I think has to do with like the character the song's about, and he's just saying all this crazy shit. But then all of a sudden it gets kind of slow again. It's like this slow bridge section where James is singing really beautiful, and it keeps building up, and then James hit this incredible scream that goes into the guitar solo of the song, which is once again one of John Petrucci's best guitar solos, and I think it's easily the highlight of the entire song. Everything about the song is just so perfect, and I think the structure of it is what makes it so interesting, is where you listen to almost the entire song, and you thought, if you weren't paying attention, maybe you already passed the guitar solo or something, but then all of a sudden the guitar solo comes in and it demands your entire attention and steals the entire song. Then we have the final part, The Silent Man, which is not much to talk about. It doesn't belong with it. It's kind of a boring, generic ballad that I was never a big fan of, and it was a single. It's just so corny. I don't even think Kevin Moore's in the song. It's very generic. Then we have Mirror, which is interconnected sort of with the next song, The Lie, or not The Lie, just Lie. And I think they originally wanted it to be one song, but James Labrie said that the groove to Lie was better for its own song, but I think it would have been cool to have it as one song. Now the Mirror is about Mike Portnoy's alcohol abuse that was getting pretty bad at this time, and he would even make a suite later down the road about this sort of topic. That's like a 50-minute song, one song for each album. But it all kind of starts with The Mirror. This song is very, very, very heavy. The intro is really epic and badass, and it really demands your attention right away. It's like it goes from weird melodic stuff to all of a sudden a really heavy song. Kevin Moore's keyboard work here is absolutely amazing. You get into that verse where James sounds really bizarre. He's doing that really gruff vocal style again. And you hear some like weird backing vocals from Mike Portnoy. But that pre-chorus is really cool, or like the second part of the verse where James is getting more and more fierce. The chorus is really dark and depressing and heavy. James is singing so fierce and pissed off. The instrumental section of this song is really amazing. There's some really great transitions, and the keyboard work sounds really great. And then all of a sudden it gets into this like acoustic part that still sounds really dark, and then all of a sudden you have James scream, "How the hell could you possibly forgive me?" And it gets really, really heavy and even darker. And then it goes into that part, like I said, that is the intro to Space Divest, which is later in the album, and it just sounds a little bit weird. And then they kind of jam on this like groove for like a straight minute and a half. And that groove leads into Lie, which is the next song, which is the big single on this album. And this one's very bizarre. This is very polarizing to a lot of fans. A lot of fans think this is their absolute worst song, or one of them. A lot of people really like it. I happen to be in between. I think it's good, but I can understand why a lot of people hate it. And the reason for that is, even though the riffs in the song and the grooves are great, and the middle section is awesome, that has an amazing guitar solo and all these great riffs in it, James' singing kind of sucks ass in a lot of sections of the song. I mean, I kind of have grown to like the verse where James, he just sings like in a weird group. He's like, "Daybreak in the bottom of a lake, it's 100 degrees, I can't breathe." He literally sings it like that. It's kind of bizarre. My favorite part is when he's like, "So you tell me, trust me, I can't trust you as far as I know you." The chorus is pretty cool though. I like how he screams that, and it kind of sounds heavy and stuff, but my favorite part of the whole song has got to be the new verse that they have that's a lot heavier, where he's like, "Mother Mary, quite contrary." That part is fucking awesome. But yeah, pretty cool song, but I gotta agree, that verse is pretty corny. Then we have one of my lesser favorite songs of the album, Lifting Shadows Off a Dream. Now, I will say the intro to the song is just so different and really cool. It has a lot of really great Kevin Moore keyboard lines, and it's pretty much driven by John Mayung's bass. harmonics that he's playing that sound really beautiful. It goes into a very beautiful but a little bit cheesy chorus. It doesn't have much of a payoff. It's beautiful, but they don't get like heavier or more epic with it. It's just kind of standard. I will say though that the guitar solo that they play later in the song is absolutely amazing. It keeps getting this epic atmosphere, and it feels like it's reprising the heavy sections of like Lie in the Mirror again. One of John Petrucci's best solos off the album for sure. It sounds really cool. But once again, just for what it's doing, it feels too long and it just doesn't really go anywhere. But I will say that solo, once again, is cool, and that intro is awesome. Then we have one of the absolute best songs of the entire album, Scarred. This song is so different and badass. The intro's kind of lengthy, and it sounds like a lot of almost King Crimson sounding jamming. But I love it when John Petrucci comes in with his guitar, and he does that like bluesy riff, and it goes into the bluesier solo and stuff. James is singing on the verse. It's just kind of weird. It sounds muffled and melodic. Then all of a sudden it kind of goes into a jazzy, progressive rock feel, where you have the build up to the chorus, where it gets a little bit more fast. And this song is just so unorthodox. There's all these sections, and it takes a while for it to finally get to the chorus, which is easily the highlight of the whole song. James' singing sounds amazing on it, and that groovy riff sounds badass. And I love the instrumentation, the middle section later on. There's a lot of great ideas being thrown around. This song is just so progressive and all over the place, and it's super unique. Then we have Space Divest, the final song on the album. I used to absolutely love this song because it's just so different. It's a completely keyboard-driven song, and it was written completely by Kevin Moore. But it's like 7.5 minutes of the same shit over and over and over again. It's cool and a nice end of the album, but it could have been shorter, and it would have been really cool that way, kind of like Wait for Sleep. But Wait for Sleep was like a fourth of the length of this song. So that's it. That's Awake. This album is very cool. I definitely recommend it to someone that really likes ambient, progressive rock, stuff like Opeth and stuff like that. You probably like this album. But there's a lot of experimentation on this album. So it's definitely an interesting listen.